Well, back on April 30th, just a short time ago, we had a guest speaker, and his name is Crawford Loritz. And the morning in which Crawford spoke, he made a statement in the context of his message which drew some audible responses and some head nods from the people that were sitting right around me. Crawford said this: "When we're born, we look like our parents. When we die, we look like our decisions." The audible response and the nodding heads from the people sitting around me confirmed what I believe is the response when you hear the ring of truth. The fact of the matter is, friends, you and I, at the end of life, will look like our decisions. You see, who you are today, who I am today, what your life is today, what my life today is the sum total of all the decisions that you and I have made. Hence the statement, when we die, we look like our decisions. Now, to dig a little deeper in explanation of this truth, we need to realize that all of our decisions in life fall under one of two headings. The first heading under which we could place our decisions are what I would refer to as proactive decisions. Proactive decisions. These are decisions that we make in advance of something, to say, to do something in advance. We have like big decisions like, to buy a house, to buy a car, not buy a house, not buy a car, to ask someone to marry us, to say yes to someone asking us to marry us. Big decisions like that, we make it in advance. And then smaller decisions like, let's go to the 11 o'clock service at Discovery this Sunday. Or let's go to the young adults event coming up. Or let's go out to dinner Friday night with such and such a couple or some friends. Big decisions, little decisions, we proactively make in advance. And then there are other decisions which are reactive decisions. These are the decisions we make in response to something that is said or done to us. For example, your employer comes to you and says, you know what, we're going through some tough times, we're downsizing, we're going to eliminate your position, and therefore we have to let you go. If you were to be on the receiving end of that decision on the part of your company, you would then need to make a decision in response. Or perhaps a doctor says to you, as a doctor said to me several years ago, your test came back, and yes, there is cancer. And as a result of receiving that word, I've got some decisions to make with regard to how I'm going to respond to that news. Or your car with 300,000 miles on it decides one day to die and says, I'm done, I'm tired, let me go. At that point, you have a decision to make in reaction as to what you're now going to do with that reality, all right? So friends, all the decisions you and I can make go under one of those two headings, proactive or reactive. The truth of this came home powerfully last weekend. Were you here for Ron Hicks? Did you hear his story? He made a decision one day as a 16-year-old, and then another decision when he was 18 years old that changed the course of his life. He ended up spending 33 years in the Louisiana State Penitentiary. If, by the way, you missed last weekend's message in that interview that I did with him, please do yourself a favor and go online or go to the church app and watch that message. Friends, the decisions we make often end up leading to what this series is entitled, Defining Moments. And so over the coming weeks, about 7 or 8 weekends, we are going to walk through the lives of some famous Old Testament figures. We're going to look at the decisions they made, some proactive, some reactive, some good decisions, some not so good decisions, to see what we can learn from their decision making. And let me just say at the onset that as we go through each and every weekend through a different Old Testament figure, these are real historical figures. These aren't fairy tale or comic book characters. These are real people of history who made real life decisions and live with the implications of those decisions, whether that was a blessing or a curse. Well, I want to start today by looking at an Old Testament figure who happens to be my favorite. Of all the Old Testament characters, we said, who's your favorite? I would tell you it's Daniel. Daniel is most famously known for his night in the lion's den. But that's not the decision or the event we're going to look at. That that night that he spent in the lion's den did in fact happen as a result of a decision that Daniel made. Scholars believe that he made it late in his life, so probably 70, 80 years of age that he made a decision that landed him in a lion's den. But instead, I want to look at a decision that he made when he was, based on what scholars think, about 15. About 15 years old, he made a decision. I believe the decision that he made at the age of 15 became a defining moment in his life. And because of the decision he made and what came out of it, it set the course for the rest of Daniel's life. So that's a decision I want to look at. It's found in Daniel chapter 1, so look with me in the first couple of verses as I set the context. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put them in the treasure house of his God. I'll stop right there. So the Babylon Empire is the world power of the day. The year is 606 BC when this takes place, history tells us. Babylon is located in what today is the nation of Iraq. Nebuchadnezzar the king is the most powerful man on the face of the earth. Well, he sends his troops into Jerusalem, the land of God's people, the Hebrew people, and they besiege it, they destroy it, and Nebuchadnezzar takes God's people, the Hebrew people, into captivity. We read in verse 2 that the Lord delivered Judah, God's people, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand, and you may wonder as you read that, why would God allow that? Why would God allow his people to be overthrown, their city destroyed, and to be taken into captivity? Well, there's an explanation. The explanation is this. God had made clear, dating back many, many years, all the way back to the days of Moses, that if his people would allow him to be their God, if they would walk in his ways, if they would obey him, if they would honor him, then they would live under his umbrella of protection. But if they made a decision not to do that, to not walk in his ways, to not honor him, to not follow his will, then they would in effect live outside of his umbrella of protection and experience the natural consequences of that decision. Well, at this point in time, the people, God's people, had made a decision that they didn't want to walk in his ways. They didn't want to honor him. They didn't want to obey him. They wanted to do life their way. And so as a result, they experienced the natural consequences of that decision. And as a result, Nebuchadnezzar came, and their destruction and captivity was the natural consequences of the decision they'd made. By the way, this same truth still applies today. If you and I walk in the ways of God, obey him, and he's our God, then God says to you and me, makes a promise, you will live under my umbrella of protection. Or does that mean that life won't be difficult? No. Does that mean we'll never have trials? No. But it means that we will live within the protective arms of God. But if we choose to not walk in his ways, then we end up living into the natural consequences that we bring upon ourselves as a result. Well, that's what happens here. We also read in chapter 2 that Nebuchadnezzar took some of the articles from the temple in Jerusalem. And you say, why would he do that? Well, it was his way of saying, my God is bigger and stronger than your God. And so he takes those articles. Well, he had a reason for wanting to take them, and we read of it in verse 3. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. The king, Nebuchadnezzar, wanted to raise up a next generation if you will, to serve in his court. And so he tells his chief of staff to go get the best of the best among the young men, among the Hebrew people. No physical defect, we read. Handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, meaning the brightest of the brightest young men. For 3 years, he says, I want you to enter them into a training program. What was the goal? To turn them into Babylonians. You see, at the end of the 3 years, Nebuchadnezzar wanted these young men to think like, talk like, act like, make decisions like Babylonians. And so he enrolls them in this training program for 3 years to bring that about. He's going to control their education. He's going to control what they eat. He's going to control their world, if you will, as he indoctrinates them with a Babylonian way of life so that they come out on the other side like Babylonians. Well, in verses 6 and 7, we get their names of a few, 4 young men in particular. We read this. Among these were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. So he even goes so far as to give them Babylonian names. And I want you to pause for just a moment. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of these 15-year-old boys. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? Taken out of your homeland, taken away from your family, taken to a city that you've never been to before, new literature, new language, new culture, new music, new food, new names. Everything is new. The city of Babylon would have been an intimidating place for these young men. Babylonia was 10 times the size of Jerusalem. History tells us that the ruins tell us that they had city walls 80 feet high, 100 brass gates made way for entrance and exit in and out of the city. Perhaps you've heard of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They were located there. This would have been an intimidating place. Well, in the very next verse, Daniel makes a decision. Daniel makes a decision. And we read of his decision in a single line, verse 8. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. So Daniel says, I'm not going to eat at the king's buffet. Now, if you're 15 years old, maybe some of you, you are a 15, 16-year-old young man. Maybe you have a 15 or 16-year-old young man. When I was 15, I liked the king's buffet. When mom and dad said we're going to a buffet, I'm all in. Okay? So Daniel in this case says, I'm not in. I'm not eating at the king's buffet table, not drinking the wine that he serves. The question is why? Why does he put his foot down? Well, he does so for 2 reasons. First, God had set forth dietary laws for his people, and he had made his dietary laws clear. God had said, you can eat this and this and this. Don't eat that, that, and that. Now, God didn't do that to try and restrict his people. He did it was because he was concerned for their health. And he said, if you eat this and this and this, you'll be healthy. If you eat that, that, and that, you're not going to be healthy. So Daniel knew what God's law said. But more importantly than that, and the more important reason is, the food at the king's buffet table would have been sacrificed to idols, meaning the king's food had received a pagan blessing. That pagan blessing, in effect, said, our gods will make you strong. And Daniel says, I'm not participating in that, and his 3 buddies as well, not participating in that. All right, now, as we go through this story, I want to draw out, if you will, some life lessons or principles. And the first one is this. And let me state it, and then I'll explain it. The decision drives every other decision. The decision drives every other decision. What do I mean? What I mean is this. There is one decision in life that we all make. And that one decision that we all make, every person makes, influences and drives every other decision we make. Now, some people know what that one decision is, and they make it consciously. I could go to some of you today and say, when I talk about there being one decision, do you know what I'm referring to? And some of you would say, I know exactly what you're referring to. And you would explain it, and you'd be spot on. But I would tell you, most people don't know what the one decision is. And yet, unknowingly, they've made it. In fact, they've made that one decision every day, and they make it every day of their life, even though they don't knowingly realize that they've made it. What is that one decision? Well, that one decision that influences all other decisions is a decision that this painting explains. This painting here, which I took off my office wall, was given to me by a friend several years ago. It was a painting that he asked to be painted. I don't think there are many copies of it, but he was gracious enough to give me a copy. He asked for it to be painted exactly the way it is, and if you look at the screen there, you can see it. This spot that looks lit is the birthplace of Jesus. This is a shepherd's cave where those who know the story believe that type of cave is probably where Jesus would have been born. Above it in the picture by design is the small city of Bethlehem, which during the time of Jesus' birth was probably populated by about 500 people. So very, very, very small town. Off in the distance here to the upper left of the picture is King Herod's palace. Herod the Great. Powerful, wealthy man during his day. You can literally go to Israel. You can stand in what is today the ruins of Herod's palace, and you can look out and you can see the little town of Bethlehem. At the bottom of the picture is the picture's title. And the title very simply says, "Who is King?" Who is King? Is the baby born in the manger here, as we call it, the king? Or is Herod the Great, King Herod, the king? Who's the king? This king here represents everything that the world says is king. This king has a very different message over here. Who is king? So this painting sits in my office wall. A reminder to me every day as I take my seat behind my desk. There's the picture right behind my chair. And every day as I take my seat, I look at that picture, and it reminds me to ask myself the question today, Don, who is king in your life? Friends, everybody has a king. Everybody has a king. Every person here, Winter Garden, Alafaya, watching online, and every person walking the Florida Mall down the street or walking through the airport today, ready to get on or get off a flight, everybody has a king. Most people don't even realize they have a king, but they have a king. And whoever that king is influencing and driving every decision that they make. That's why I call it the decision. Now, for most people, you say, who's the king? If they were to understand the concept, they would answer, I'm king. What that means is, I do what I think, what I feel, what I believe is best. So whatever the situation is, whatever I think is the way to go, that's what I'm going to do. And in that case, anybody who has that kind of approach to life, in effect says, I'm king. I'm king over my life. Now, in some cases, people have different kings. For example, some people have another person or persons is their king. What do I mean? Well, some people live to please other people. I want to make somebody else happy. I want to make that person happy with me. Therefore, I live to make them happy, which means that person's king. In some cases, money's king. All decisions in life are influenced by how's this going to affect my bank account. In some cases, status or power, significance, importance is king. And so every decision, if you will, in life is made through the filter of, will this help me grow with regard to status and power? In other cases, comfort is king. I want to be comfortable. Anything that makes me uncomfortable, I'm really not interested in. So as people go through life, they filter every decision through, well, will this help me be more comfortable, or will this make me uncomfortable? I'm always going to choose to be comfortable. Comfort is king. In some case, feelings are king. If it feels good, I want to do it. If it doesn't feel good, I don't want to do it. Feelings are king. In some cases, work is king. Work is the dominant. Everything in life revolves around work. Well, friends, Daniel had a king, and his king was the living God. How do we know? Because when it came down to the decision of whether or not he was going to eat at the king's table, he knew what his king said. And what his king said was, first of the 10 commandments, you shall have no other gods before me. And as a result of saying, you will have no other gods before me because you are my king, you are not my king, I'm going to do what you, my king, says to do. You are my God. And because eating at the king's buffet would cause me, in effect, to make a decision to say there's another God who is king, he will make me strong. Not making that decision. I'm not participating in that. Well, this presents Daniel and his friends with a problem. What are they going to eat? Well, the verse goes on. We read this. Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and so he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. So he goes to his overseer and he says, hey, I got a problem here. Respectfully, he says, I don't want to eat at the king's table here. I would like permission to not have to do that. Well, this overseer, just to paraphrase his answer, says to him, well, Daniel, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work because you're going to put me in a bad spot. You see, I don't really care what you eat. However, if you're not eating at the king's buffet, compared to all the other young men who are enrolled in the same program, they're eating at the king's buffet, it's going to be just a matter of time before you look malnourished. And as a result, my head is going to be on the chopping block. So, Daniel, this is a no-can-do. Well, Daniel responds, verse 12. Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. And so he, the overseer, agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. Daniel says, can we give it a try? By doing this, Daniel was, in effect, having confidence in the fact that God was going to honor his decision to honor him. Which brings me to the second insight or principle I want to draw out of this story, and it's this. Decisions that honor God require faith in God. Decisions that honor God require faith in God. Friends, I can tell you this. I know it from personal experience. I know it from the pages of Scripture and stories such as this. If you choose to make God king, there will be times in life when you will have to make decisions in faith. You won't make the decision based on what you think is best, what you feel is best, what you believe is best, or what is logical to you. You will have to make a decision in faith. Let me illustrate. Many years ago now, we have some family friends that living in Michigan. Our family was living in Chicago at the time, Chicago area. They had invited us to come over for several days and hang out with them. And so we thought that was a good idea. So we went over there. They lived on a lake, had a home on a lake. And as a result, they had some water toys, okay? Now, our family lived in the Chicago suburbs, concrete, all over the place. We don't live on a lake, all right? I don't have water toys. So we go over there, and he says, hey, my friend says to me, let's go take these. We got a couple wave runners. Let's go out for a ride on the water and wave runners. You know what a wave runner is, right? Okay, you live in Florida. Of course you know what a wave runner is. So I'd never been on a wave runner. Never been on a wave runner. So I get on a wave runner, and at that point in my life, I like speed, okay? Not the bad kind, but, speed. Going fast. I want to be clear. I don't want any confusion. Oh, my pastor likes speed. No, I like going fast. We all clear? All right, good. So we get out there, and of course, he's got like the fastest wave runners that you can buy. So we're on the lake, and I got the throttle all the way down. I used to have a Harley Davidson. I used to like to drive that fast too. And so we're going really fast. Well, after a little while, right, tooling around, he says to me, hey, I want you to try something. I said, okay, what's that? He says, well, I want you to go as fast as you possibly can, and then when you get at top speed, I want you to take a hard left. And I said, serious? He said, yeah, fast as you can, and then just take a hard left. And I said, that doesn't seem to have a good end result to it. Seems to me I'm going to get hurt. He said, no, trust me, it'll be fun, trust me. So, of course, all the logic, was going through my mind, and I'm thinking, if I did that in my car, went as fast as I could and took a hard left, that wouldn't be a good outcome. I'm thinking, He says, trust me. So I said, okay, he is my friend. I don't think my friend's going to hurt me, okay? So I got on the water again, hit the throttle, going as fast as I possibly could, and I'm thinking to myself, hard left. I'm trying to convince myself to take a hard left. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go for it. So top speed, I take a hard left. And you know what? It worked. Woohoo! This is really fun. This is fun. So now from that point on, I'm going throughout the lake fast as I can. Hard left, hard right, hard left, hard right. It was fun. It was like a whole nother level of wave running. Friends, there are going to be times in life when God's going to tell you something, and all of your logic and everything that you feel is going to tell you, don't do that. And God says, trust me. And at that point in time, you're going to have to make a decision. Who is king? Who is king? You see, if my logic and my feelings had been king in my life, I would have never taken a hard left. But I trusted my friend's voice, his word. So, for example, when God says to you, I want you to bring at least 10% back to me, you say, hey, hang on, God, I'm living paycheck to paycheck as it is. How in the world am I going to bring 10% back? And God says, trust me. God, we're dating, we're serious, think we're going to get married. We probably ought to live together. Let's make sure this thing is going to work before we really make the commitment. And God says, no, don't do that. Trust me. Yeah, but God, everything in me and all of my feelings tell me we ought to take a trial run at this thing. And God says, no, trust me. And you got a choice to make. Within our culture today, we have a number of people, mostly young people, who are saying, well, I was born with this body, but I think I should have been born with this body. I feel as though I should have been Martha instead of Mark, or I should have been Mark instead of Martha. Logically, this makes sense to me, to which God says, Trust me. I didn't make any mistakes. Psalm 139, the psalmist writes, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days of my life were adorned for me, were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious are your thoughts to me, O God, how vast the sum of them." God didn't make any mistakes, friends. He didn't make any mistakes. I can tell you there are going to be times in life, if you choose to honor the King, that your logic and your feelings are going to come in conflict with what God says is true. And God is going to say to you what my friend said to me: trust me. And then you've got a choice to make. Who is king? The one who made you, or you, or your friends, or someone else? Well, let's see how this plays out. Verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set forth the king to be brought in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and so they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom, and Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. The third insight: decisions that honor God receive God's blessing. Decisions that honor God receive God's blessing. As we read in 1 Samuel 2:30, the Lord declares, "Those who honor me, I will honor." God says, you honor me as king. Make decisions that honor me as king. Trust me. Put your faith in me. I will honor you. That honor may not come, friends, in a week or in a month or in a year, but the promise of God is true. Honor me in the decisions you make, and I will honor you. As a 15-year-old young man, Daniel and his 3 friends made the decision to make God king. It became a defining moment in their life. From there, they made decisions. In fact, if you read the book of Daniel through the first 6 chapters, you'll see decision after decision after decision that these 4 young men made to honor God, the living God, as their king. Daniel would go on to serve 4 kings over the course of his life with great success, with great influence. He, in effect, became the prime minister of each of the nations that he was serving in. Quite a story. Well, when I first studied this story many years ago, I was struck by something about it. That which struck me was the nature of Daniel's decision about the food, which I call an everyday decision. We typically think of our decisions in life as the ones that are the defining moments are the big ones, the important ones. I'm going to take this job. We're going to move there. I'm going to leave this job. I'm going to marry this person. These are the big decisions. And, those big decisions we make once sometimes in life, 3 times in life, 5 times in life. We don't make them every day. But this decision about what to eat, that's an everyday decision. In fact, we make it multiple times a day. And yet this everyday decision was one that became a defining moment in Daniel's life. And I remember reading the story many years ago and thinking to myself, God, what are you trying to say here? And the thought that came to mind and what I wrote down that day in my notes, and in fact, it became so powerful to me that I got a little block of wood and I had a plaque made out. And on this plaque, it simply reads, honor God in the everyday decisions of life, and he will honor you for a lifetime. Honor God in the everyday decisions of life, and he will honor you for a lifetime. You know, friends, it's the everyday decisions of life that are the building blocks of a life. Sure, your life will be impacted by the person you marry. Sure, your life will be impacted by the job you take or the job you leave or the house you buy or where you choose to live, the church you choose to attend. Obviously, those are all really important decisions. But friends, don't miss the fact that the everyday decisions of life are the decisions that you make a life out of. The decision to get up in the morning and to spend some time with God. Every morning, or almost every morning in my life, I start my day alone with God. Spending some time reading his word, spending time bringing my day before him, every meeting I'm going to have, every event I'm going to participate in, or preparation of a message, everything is brought before him, in effect to say as I sit down in my chair, you're the king. O Lord, as king of my life today, may everything I get engaged in today be a reflection of the fact that you are king. And friends, those everyday decisions that you make, frankly, when you make the everyday decisions the right way, when you get to the big decisions, your chances of making the right one go way up. You don't make great decisions in the big decisions of life simply in a moment. You make wise decisions in the big decisions of life because you make the everyday decisions the right way. And that becomes the building block for wise decision making in the great decisions and important decisions of life. All right, now, one more thought before I wrap this up. And this struck me yesterday morning as I was reading through this passage once again. Nebuchadnezzar brought these young men in, and his whole goal at the end of 3 years was to turn them into Babylonians. He wanted them to think like Babylonians, talk like Babylonians, act like Babylonians, eat like Babylonians, listen to the music of Babylonians. He wanted them to be engulfed in Babylonian life and culture. So he had a strategy for how he was going to do that. When you look at the story and you see how he sought to do it, basically he did 3 things. Number 1, he controlled their information. He controlled their information. What does it say here? He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. These boys needed to show aptitude for every kind of learning. In other words, the very place he began was he said, we're going to inform them of what we want them to know as true. For 3 years, we're going to dump information into their minds to shape how they think, what they know, what they believe to be true. On the heels of that, we're going to feed them at the king's buffet. We're going to provide them with self-gratification. We're going to give them the ability to satisfy their appetite, their desires. What better way for a 15-year-old boy than the king's buffet? Can you imagine 3 meals a day at the king's buffet? And then finally, after that, he gives them new names. What does that mean? I even want to change their identity. I don't want them to be known as Daniel. I want them to be known as Belteshazzar, which, by the way, that name, its root was tied to a Babylonian god. I want to give them a new identity. As I sat thinking about this yesterday, I thought, wow, nothing's changed in 3,000 years. The enemy has the same strategy. You see, the culture in which we live in today wants to make you and me and wants to make our children and our grandchildren Babylonians. Our culture today doesn't want us to have this king. Our culture today wants us to have that king. This king thinks, talks, acts, decides differently than this king. And so what does our culture do? Our culture bombards us with information. It comes through Hollywood. It comes through the media. It comes through education. Never did I think I'd see the day when there would be discussion with regard to a child's education. Who's ultimately responsible, the school or a parent? Seriously? We're like having this discussion? And the information comes. And friends, the information that's coming through TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all the other social media outlets, as well as television and the movies, the media in general, and through music and through books. Books that parents sometimes bring to school board meetings and because they're sexually explicit begin to read and the school board shuts it down, and yet we leave it in the school library so a third grader can get hold of it. Friends, this is madness. But you see, the culture is trying to turn you and me and our children into Babylonians. Where does it start? With information. Mom and Dad, are you awake? Are you awake? Young people listening to me right now who are 15, 16, 18, 20, 25 years old, are you awake? Do you understand what's coming your way and what the agenda is to turn you into a Babylonian? On the heels of that, the world sends a message in the midst of its information download, and that is gratify yourself. It's your body. Do with your body as you please. And what's interesting about that, friends, is not one of us created ourselves. In fact, not one of us made a decision to even be here today. Somebody else made a decision that gave birth to us. And those that want to trumpet and hold placards in the streets saying, my body, my right, my choice. No, you're wrong. It's God's body. He's given it to you to manage. You see, friends, it's not self-gratifying to say it belongs to you. I'm going to honor you with my body. It's far more gratifying to say, I'm going to do what I feel is right. The problem is that it's not right. In fact, where you come to the end of the story with identity, whoever thought we'd come to a day, if we go back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, who thought we'd be at a day where we'd be discussing whether or not people want to be actually called by their name? Don't call me this. I'd like to be known as this. Or the dispute over my pronouns or your pronouns. What are we doing? Friends, identities are being challenged and changed. The enemy who was behind information, self-gratification, and identity transformation in order to turn out Babylonians is still employing the same strategy in our culture today. And we as God's people need to be awake to this and in effect say, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. I'm not. I'm not going to buckle. I'm going to let the word of the King of Kings be the information that I take in as my food and I base my life decisions upon. And as I said earlier, at times it's going to go against your logic and against your feelings. And you just have to look to the King who says to you, trust me. And make the choice to trust him. He made you. He loves you. He gave his son for you. He knows what's best for all of us. In closing, know this. This palace up here with this king, I've been there. You know what's there? Ruins. Everything is ruined. Friends, everything the world tells us we need to abide by and go after and is really important, one day it's going to lead to something for us. And you know what that is? The ruining of our lives. Don't let it happen to you. Abide by the King of Kings, who is eternal and still sits on the throne today, and the King with whom you'll spend an eternity. He's not ruining anybody. He's building people. So I said this at the beginning, this is a life message. Do you understand why? Make it your life message. To let the King of Kings be your King. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. I want to give you a moment of reflection. Maybe today is the day that you need to say, oh, Jesus, up to this point in time, I've been my own king. I don't want to be king anymore. I want you to be king. Come into my life. Be my Savior. Be my Lord. Be my King. Maybe right now you're a person who says, I made Jesus king, but since I did that, I've taken back the throne. And I need to get off the throne once again and make him king. Practically, I need to make him king. I don't know what that looks like for you, but I want to give you a moment to think that through. Because friends, ultimately, the decisions we make in life, thousands of them, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands over the course of our life, they all flow from one main decision: who is king? Heavenly Father, you sent a very loud message to us with regard to your desire and your motive for being king when you left the splendor of heaven and came to earth and ultimately gave your life on a cross to make it possible for us to live forever. Such an act is an act of the true king. Father, may we be a people individually and as families who honor you as King. And even when life is hard and our logic and our feelings and what we're inclined to think is best doesn't come in alignment with your word, oh Lord, by the power of your Holy Spirit, help us to make the choice to let you be King, trusting that your word will lead us to where we need to go for our own good. Ultimately, we live to the glory of your name. And in that name we pray. Amen. Amen.